Men in business suits surrounded the head of the frightened brunette sticking out of the ground, whom they had buried in the forest. One of the thugs with a brazen look approaches the young man for seducing him and running away without thinking of the consequences. 3 hours ago, the brunette was still sitting in a nightclub, unwinding and drinking alcohol calmly. A friend approached the young man and during their conversation invited Sun Chung to go out together. The friend promised to cover all expenses himself. Sun Chung immediately realized that his friend was withholding something as paying for others was not his usual practice. Approaching the protagonist and placing a hand on his shoulder, the cheerful friend exclaimed that he wanted to go to Kangwon Land again. Sun Chung was horrified, but the friend insisted that after the exams they definitely deserved to have some fun. The stunned brunette, getting up from the table, reproached his friend for losing all their money in the casino last time, which almost left them stranded there. The carefree friend remembers that they were able to leave Kangwon Land thanks to Sun Chung who, by some magical means, managed to earn money. The friend persuades the lucky brunette to go with them, but he, heading to the restroom, firmly refuses this frivolous plan. In the restroom, Sun Chung noticed a strange dark-haired man in a business suit emanating a purple haze. The young man mentally noted the impressive natural attributes of the stranger. Sun Chung has an unusual ability. He sees a haze around other people that can reveal their fate. Additionally, thanks to his skills, the brunette can pick winning lottery tickets. The protagonist heard that his ancestors were shamans, but he is not that talented and therefore cannot always use his gift. The ability can be enhanced through proximity to a person with whom he shares certain waves. This is exactly what Sun Chung had to do in Kangwon Land to earn back the lost money. His friend Byung Chun had no idea how they suddenly came into money during their last trip. The protagonist no longer intends to go to the establishment to bail out his friend from debt. So he leaves the nightclub, texting Byung Chun that he is withdrawing from the trip. The brunette, engrossed in his phone, accidentally bumped into someone and looking up recognized the same man from the restroom who was now glaring at him. Sun Chung continued walking but was slightly unsettled by the fact that the dark-haired man was following him. Soon, the brunette ran into another man in a business suit who bowed to him. The protagonist became seriously alarmed and turning around saw a satisfied smile on his pursuer's face. Sun Chung suddenly recalled where he had seen this man before. But in the next moment, the brunette was struck hard on the back of the head. A month ago, in Kangwon Land, Byung Chun was left with only a few coins from a substantial sum, which infuriated Sun Chung as they couldn't leave without money. The protagonist's friend started calling his acquaintances to borrow the necessary amount. But it was all in vain. The brunette nervously grabbed his head when suddenly he had an idea. Leaving his friend behind, Sun Chung searched the entire establishment for a suitable person and finally found the man with the necessary purple haze. The protagonist followed the stranger into the restroom and suddenly attacked him and kissed him to gain the necessary power. The man began to resist this unexpected contact but soon ceased to oppose the young man's persistent actions. Sun Chung, touching the dark-haired man, mentally begged for the special sensation he needed to activate his ability to come forth quickly. The brunette finally got what he wanted and quickly distancing himself from the man, happily went to the exit, propping a mop against the door handle. He locked the stranger inside. The dark-haired man was stunned by such audacity. He became extremely angry with the protagonist and began shouting curses and threats at Sun Chung. The delighted brunette hurriedly apologized and decided to share with the man that his face radiated a vile energy, meaning he might soon face some trouble. After this prediction, Sun Chung quickly fled, leaving the enraged business stranger locked in the restroom. Now the dark-haired man with a satisfied smile watches as the cheeky one from Kangwon Land is buried up to his head in the ground. A knife is presented to the man when he expresses a desire to gut the offender, which further terrifies the frightened Sun Chung. But suddenly, the generous bandit took pity on the victim and offered two options. Either the brunette's tongue and hands, which touched another's body, would be cut off or he would be left in the forest alone for a week, where there are many wild animals and few people. Shocked, Sun Chung chose the second option, but as the man whispered to his people, the protagonist noticed the same purple haze which is the harbinger of unforeseen misfortune. The bandits were about to leave, ironically wishing the young man luck, when suddenly the brunette decided to take a risk and intrigue his abductor. He shouted that something bad had happened to him. The dark-haired man stopped and remembered that when Sun Chung had locked him in the restroom, He had said the same thing. And 2 days later, the man was seriously injured with a knife. Approaching the young man, the bandit lifted the frightened hero's face with his foot and soon learned that he had some sort of prophetic gift. It seemed that the young man had a plan, so they ordered his subordinate, Soul Guy, to knock out the young man and take him to the warehouse. At first, Sun Chung breathed a sigh of relief as he had managed to save his life. But then he was horrified to see that someone was raising a shovel to knock him out again. Sun Chung opened his eyes and realized he was in an unfamiliar dark room. The brunette tried to open the door, but it was locked, so he sank to the floor, feeling the pain in his head from the recent blows. Suddenly, the door opened and the protagonist, squinting from the harsh light, saw a very familiar man. The dark-haired man informed Sun Chung that he was right in predicting misfortune. As his adoptive father had died, the brunette began to express his condolences but quickly stopped, either out of fear of the captor or because of the headache. The man does not believe that his adoptive father, who was an expert in cars, died in a car accident due to brake failure. The dark-haired man suspects something is amiss, so he orders Sun Chung to use his shamanic abilities to find the traitor. The brunette wanted to politely explain the impossibility of this plan, but hesitated and decided not to reveal to the dangerous person how his gift of foresight worked. The angry man punched the wall next to the protagonist, making a hole so that the young man, frightened, confessed that he needed to experience pleasure from close contact for his ability to work. The stirred man was surprised and contemptuously reproached the embarrassed Sun Chung. Nonetheless, the dark-haired man called Soul Gay and ordered him to undress. The subordinate complied without question while being briefed on the situation. The employee then declared he was willing to do much if it would help find the murderer of the senior chairman. Sun Chung was stunned by the subordinate's physical attributes. The dark-haired man, however, was puzzled why the shaman was not starting the necessary actions. The embarrassed brunette could not explain properly, so the man thought that Soul Gay did not appeal to the young man, and thus ordered all other employees to be brought in. In a moment, the room was filled with numerous naked servants. The brunette's vision blurred, and the leader was about to call more boys for the shaman. But he finally revealed that his ability only worked with him personally. The dark-haired man was horrified by this news and looked sternly at Sun Chung, clearly not wanting to be involved in such matters. Suddenly, the man abruptly approached the shaman and punched the wall a second time just inches from the protagonist's head. The leader expressed his outrage, noting that many boys had been brought to the brunette and he could not choose among them, such as Soul Gay, who was renowned for his skills. The reddened shaman confessed that special energy waves must match. That's why Sun Chung had attacked the dark-haired man earlier. The leader frowned but, without much thought, grabbed the brunette and led him to his room. There, he pushed the young man onto a rather hard bed. The troubled man paced the room with thought. If he had any clues about who the murderer of his father was, he would never have resorted to this. The leader looked at Sun Chung and, nervously smirking, began undressing, presenting himself to the shaman. He gave him only 10 minutes for his ability to work. The stunned brunette, watching this with amazement, could not believe that this was really happening. The dark-haired man's gaze unsettled Sun Chung, so the young man did not dare to touch him. Moreover, he was not sure he could help as he had neither experience nor talent in capturing criminals. Sun Chung trembled with fear as the man counted down the minutes. The brunette decided that he would die if he did nothing and hoped the ghosts of his shamanic ancestors might help him. Looking at the bandit's body, the hero was captivated as it resembled a sculpture, though he noted that Soul Gay did indeed have more impressive attributes. Sun Chung didn't realize he had said this aloud, which angered the man. The frightened brunette immediately started to apologize, praising the leader's body and comparing it to a work of art. The irritated bandit threatened the young man and announced that he had only 6 minutes left. Sun Chung finally touched his interlocutor, causing him to flinch. The young man was unsure if he could invoke the desired sensation in such a tense situation, so he mentally asked his ancestors for help. The shaman, working with all his might, noticed that the seemingly formidable man was also experiencing pleasure. When the leader reminded him that there was only 1 minute left and the young man was on the verge of achieving the desired result, a man suddenly burst into the room, calling for Jin Bei-yoon. The red-eyed visitor smirked upon catching the dark-haired man in such a moment. He openly laughed at Jin Bei-yoon's ability to be intimate even during a period of mourning. Sun Chung was frightened by the sudden visit of the guests and the angry bandit. But upon closer examination of the former, The shaman suddenly saw rebellious energy around him. The brunette pointed at the newcomer, boldly stating that he was the criminal, but then hesitated as his evidence was insufficient to definitively identify the murderer. Jin Bei-yoon ordered Sol Bei to take Hae-yoon out of the room while he dealt with the situation. As the leader dressed, the embarrassed hero thought he would not mind continuing personal contact if it worked for this sudden situation. The brunette explained that rebellious energy indicated a traitor. However, the shaman could not name the red-eyed man as guilty since everything happened so quickly. And the Haes might have simply stayed with someone who had been near the actual murderer for a long time. Jin Bei-yoon was furious about being in such an embarrassing situation. What angered him further was that the shaman had discovered so little information. Soon, the leader ordered Sol Bei to start the car so they could go and bury the imposter in the forest again. But the frightened Sun Chung, in a panic, grabbed Jin Bei-yoon's hand, insisting that he just needed more time and feeling. Suddenly, the dark-haired man asked if they needed to experience pleasure every time he encountered a suspected murderer. The hero, timidly releasing Jin Bei-yoon's hand, admitted that it was probably the case, though sometimes he saw the haze on his own. The young man looked at the leader and saw a smirk on his face that quickly changed to an angry snarl. Jin Bei-yoon clearly did not intend to undress before the brunette every time. So the poor Sun Chung was sent to the dark warehouse, where he was locked up once again. Sun Chung is painting the wall with stones as it's one of the few activities he can use to pass the time. For the second day, the brunette has been in the warehouse, where he has only given cheap food from the store. The guy was already despairing, reflecting on his worthless and rather short life, but suddenly thought it was unfair. Sun Chung approached the door and decided that this situation could not continue any longer. Taking a risk, he shouted an insult at the gangsters, after which the door abruptly opened, hitting the shaman painfully in the face. Sol Bei, who even felt sorry for the brunette, took him somewhere within moments. Meanwhile, Jin Bei-yoon was sitting in his office, drinking alcohol. He was reminiscing about Tank, the chief assistant to his adoptive father. Tank was certain that the deceased would have noticed the malfunction, so he hopes that the dark-haired man will find the murderer and resolve the terrible situation. Jin Bei-yoon knows that the traitor is someone close to their organization, but finding him would mean having to humble himself again before the shaman. Tank admitted that the dark-haired man is much more reliable than the late Bei-yoon's biological son. And that's why Tank valued him so highly. The chief assistant of the deceased advised to hurry before the position of the gang leader is filled. Jin Bei-yoon promised to find the guilty party no matter what. Suddenly, Tank asked about the rumors spread by the deceased biological son. They concerned the leader being called the certain guy in the bedroom earlier. The dark-haired man quickly concealed his agitation and then explained that it was merely a misunderstanding. And the red-eyed one had misunderstood everything. As he was leaving, Tank reproached Sol Bei-yoon for not guarding his master properly as strangers were approaching him. The subordinate admitted his guilt to the leader and suggested using a repellent talisman on the shaman. Lighting a cigarette, Jin Bei-yoon smirked, as such protection would likely be ineffective. Moreover, the leader would have to make use of the brunette's services. Jin Bei-yoon loudly placed the empty glass on the table, startling Sun Jaeon, who had just been brought into the office. Pouring more alcohol, he promised to forgive the shaman all his offenses if the shaman found the murderer of the deceased. Before agreeing, the hero reminded how he could activate the ability. The irritated Jin Bei-yoon admitted he had not forgotten about that condition. The glass in the gangster's hand shattered under the strain of negative emotions. The dark-haired man promised to give the shaman access to all the gang members, so he could find the traitor within a month at the latest. The next moment, he confidently expressed his desire to get to work and sternly ordered Sun Jaeon to undress. The brunette dared to stammer about escaping, prompting the fearsome Jin Bei-yoon to slam a table, assuring the guy that his subordinates were experts at finding people, so he would not be able to hide. The leader reported that he had found all the information about the brunette, so Sun Jaeon had to agree to any conditions. Blood suddenly flowed from the shaman's nose, which enraged Jin Bei-yoon. The dark-haired man threatened to kill the boy if he fantasized about intimacy at inappropriate times. The blushing Sun Jaeon clearly did not expect such a reaction from his body and such harsh rules. Troubled and battered, Sun Jaeon, with a suitcase and bag, enters the room thinking that he will have to live here for a whole month. An hour ago, Jin Bei-yoon ordered Sol Dae to allocate the shaman a room the farthest from his own. The subordinate grabbed the hero by the scruff and kicked him onto the porch, instructing him to go home and gather all necessary things. The brunette was astonished that he would have to live with a gang, that there was no choice. And Sun Jae-on even looked for positives, at least he wouldn't have to sleep in the warehouse. The guy cautiously entered his house as his parents were unaware that their son would be living outside his home for a whole month. On the table, the hero found a note revealing that his family had gone on a month-long cruise. Previously, his phone had been taken away, so he was actually glad that his relatives would be busy with their vacation rather than searching for their son. Upon leaving the house, Sun Jae-on met one of Jin Bei-yoon's subordinates, Ji Bei. The blonde noticed the shaman's sadness and after loading the items into the trunk, asked to be referred to as just an old acquaintance. The brunette barely agreed, but then became anxious when his interlocutor handed him a phone. Ji Bei asked him not to tell anyone about this and the happy hero eagerly agreed. Thanking the subordinate, in the gang's mansion, Sol Lee asked the shaman to draw 2 talismans in the morning. One to repel perverts and the other to reduce pain. The guy was puzzled as he did not understand such matters and had not been trained in such practices. But apparently the gangsters were unconcerned. One stern look from Sol Lee was enough for Sun Jae-on to quickly grab a marker and start drawing. The brunette glanced briefly through the window of the gang members' training. The leader's subordinate finally received the talismans, which were just scribbles, and the anxious hero could only hope that the man would not have any doubts. Moments later, Sol Lee surprised the guy with a frank question. He wanted to know how his natural attributes compared to those of his superior. The embarrassed Sun Jae-on thought he must have misheard, but the subordinate unhesitatingly repeated the question. The brunette had to delve into his memories to mentally compare and say that the difference between the men was about 1 centimeter. The hero still did not understand the purpose of the question, but Sol Lee only sent the shaman to the dining room as breakfast was starting in 10 minutes. Before leaving, the man warned the brunette that starting tomorrow morning, he would need to join their morning training and schedule. Sun Jae-on was stunned and nearly fell off his chair in shock. He could not understand why he needed such a schedule if he was only temporarily living with the gangsters. The brunette wanted to refuse everything, but the breakfast interested him so much that he admitted things weren't so bad after all. In the dining room, Jin Gai-yoon was sitting at the other end of the table. So Sun Jae-on was not too afraid to look at the man. The brunette admitted that the gangster was truly handsome, so it would be strange if he were not popular among other guys. The hero suddenly understood why Sol Lee had asked for the talisman to be drawn. Before he could think about the purpose of the second one, Jin Gai-yoon abruptly called out to the shaman, which greatly alarmed him. The gangster rudely ordered the brunette not to look at him, and the tense Sun Jae-on obediently turned away. Jin Gai-yoon announced that there would be a gathering of the gang's leaders that day. The shaman, in astonishment, dropped a piece of meat when he heard that he would also be attending the meeting. Several men in business suits are guarding a black car, in which Sun Jae-on is trying to activate his ability with Jin Gai-yoon. The brunette is struggling, which only irritates the gangster. The shaman explains that if the dark-haired man wants to find the murderer, he should also participate in the process. When the man took out a knife, Sun Jae-on immediately jumped to the other side of the car, exclaiming that it was all for the investigation. The brunette shyly admits that he has no experience and is scared himself. After an awkward silence, the hero adds that he took a shower today. An angry Jin Gai-yoon is convinced that the shaman had planned everything in advance to carry out his explicit schemes. Sun Jae-on is outraged that the gangster could think such a thing about him. The irritated guy assures that Jin Gai-yoon is not his type at all. But if refuses to help, he should not complain later about not finding the criminal. The dark-haired man became angry and, after a brief pause, agreed, sternly ordering the guy to undress. The astonished brunette quickly complied with his superior's request. During the process, Sun Jae-on complained that the clumsy man was being too rough. Jin Gai-yoon was outraged as he had never done such things with other men before. While Sun Jae-on continued to complain, the gangster decided to act without further instructions, which surprised the brunette as it proved effective. The guy was almost getting what he wanted when someone knocked on the car. Jin Gai-yoon rolled down the tinted window and solely reported that all the gang leaders had gathered at the specified location. The dark-haired man realized he needed to hurry in adjusting his tie and dressed as shaman. Jin Gai-yoon is confident that Sun Jae-on knows perfectly well what will happen if he does not find the traitor. The brunette assures that he will do his best. Then the irritated gangster adds that if the shaman criticizes the leader's skills again, he will be killed. The hero looks at the man in surprise, noticing that the leader also seemed to enjoy the recent closeness. Soon, a single phrase from the gangster made the guy turn away. Sun Jae-on silently rides in the car, unable to sit still. During their recent intimacy, the guy almost got what he wanted, but was just short of it. Bored, the brunette looks out the window, and suddenly noticing something, abruptly asks to stop the car. When the order was executed, the happy guy went to a nearby store and bought several lottery tickets. Sun Jae-on was incredibly bold, persistently wanting to enter the store, pleading with the boss to give him some money to buy sure-win tickets. As his ability was currently at its peak, Jin Gai-yoon had never met someone like a shaman before, as the brunette promised to return the borrowed amount fourfold when he got back in the car. Sun Jae-on was excited and eagerly wanted to know the size of his winnings. But the serious gangster made the guy finally quiet down. The brunette obeyed and soon realized he had never seen the boss laugh. The guy felt sorry that such a handsome face belonged to a fearsome gangster. Upon arrival, the shy Sun Jae-on hid behind Jin Gai-yoon, who was greeted with respectful bows by everyone. A pretty woman was among them. And when the dark-haired man went somewhere, instructing the shaman to stay put, the brunette still could not recall where he had seen this lady before. Jae suddenly approached Sun Jae-on to clarify if the shaman had fallen for the stranger. The guy confidently dismissed the idea, and the blonde explained that the woman had been a highly sought-after actress, and the late senior chairman had entrusted her with this establishment. The hero was intrigued by this story, but quickly became embarrassed, deciding he was paying too much attention to the gangsters. His task was to find the murderer, and in a month he would return to his normal life spending the lottery winnings. The shaman suddenly remembered he didn't know of his winnings yet, and after scratching off the protective layer from the tickets, Sun Jae-on discovered a very large amount. Jae watched the lucky person with interest, acknowledging that the brunette truly had a useful talent. The hero explained that detecting winning tickets also required energy, so he couldn't use this ability constantly. The blonde wanted to know the details of how the ability works best. Sun Jae-on was taken aback by such an unexpected question, but answered it honestly. The door opened, and Jin Gai-yoon finally called the shaman. Jae had to nudge the hero because the guy didn't immediately realize that he was being called. The shaman cautiously entered, hoping that the criminal would be one of those sitting at the table. The leader asked the new family member to introduce himself, but before he could say his name, the gang leaders were already outraged that Jin Gai-yoon had brought a stranger. Hai-yoon announced that the dark-haired man finally had a partner. As if before the gangster had avoided such relationships, now this taste had changed. Otherwise, the man would not have been with the guy during the general mourning for the deceased. Sun Jae-on could no longer stay in such a tense place, so the embarrassed brunette carefully backed away, trying to slip away unnoticed. But Jin Gai-yoon suddenly pulled the shaman close, hugging him. The gangster forced a smile and said that Hai-yoon was absolutely right. He had a partner now. Sun Jae-on froze in terror as Jin Gai-yoon praised his companion, claiming that he scared away all the other guys. The gangster and the shaman stood embracing under the scrutinizing gazes of the leaders, while the brunette mentally cursed at the dark-haired man, who had not even warned him about the upcoming deception. When Sun Jae-on and Jin Gai-yoon exited the building, the shaman immediately confronted the gangster with indignation, but the latter quickly silenced him. Lighting a cigarette, the boss moved on to the main topic, whether the shaman had seen the criminal this time. Sun Jae-on found it strange, but the negative energy was lingering around each man. Some were stronger, some weaker. The guy suspects that none of them are innocent, but at least one of them had seen the criminal. Jin Gai-yoon didn't believe this, so he began reproaching the shaman for wasting his energy on the lottery. But an outraged Sun Jae-on countered, while his ability doesn't last long. A couple of winning tickets certainly wouldn't disappear. The gangster can only hope that the shaman wasn't lying to him to maintain close contact. The hero assures that he doesn't want to be the gangster's boyfriend. And besides, the brunette still doesn't understand why Jin Gai-yoon had to stage such a humiliating scene in front of others. The dark-haired man says that it is necessary so that no one suspects the boss of actively searching for the murderer through the shaman. Jin Gai-yoon, looking at the brunette, suddenly got angry about having such an ability. Sun Jaeon asked the gangster not to complain, as if he truly wanted to find the traitor he would have to endure. Seeing that the dark-haired man was about to lose his temper, the brunette hid behind Sol Dae. The frightened hero advised the boss to be cautious today because there was bad energy around him. Jin Gai-yoon, once again amazed by the shaman's audacity, left the guy alone and ordered Sol Dae to find out who all the gang members had seen recently. Sun Jaeon was sure they would go home after this meeting. But he was wrong. They went to a nightclub. Jin Gai-yoon ignored all the brunette's questions. So Jae-bae had to explain that the establishment was one of the boss's properties. It was an official place, and the dark-haired man received a large share of its profits. Jae-bae suddenly stopped, causing the hero, who was following closely, to bump into the blonde's back. But the subordinate wasn't too concerned, as he was more interested in the fact that an insistent light-haired man approached the boss again. He also had his share in the nightclub. So Jin Gai-yoon ignored the intrusiveness of the nuisance, as ruining relations with a business partner wasn't worth it. But Jae-bae was sure that the man wouldn't dare to touch the boss because of the talisman Sun Jaeon had drawn. The blonde friendly placed his hand on the shaman's shoulder and asked him to create an attraction for female attention sometime. The hero realized that past lies could become obvious to everyone now, leading to problems, so the guy quickly moved closer to the men, preventing the light-haired man from touching the boss. Sun Jaeon hurt his stomach. But after getting up, he began to push the impudent man away from Jin Gai-yoon. The shaman could hardly hear the stranger's indignation because everything in front of his eyes was swimming. Irritated, Jin Gai-yoon merely closed his eyes warily when he saw the guy lying on the floor. Sun Jaeon woke up in the boss's house and, recalling what happened, felt ashamed for losing consciousness so quickly, as he had served in the army and his endurance should have been appropriate. The brunette saw Jae-bae nearby, listening to music and clumsily singing along. So he got out of bed and asked the blonde to stop. Jin Gai-yoon's subordinate was surprised that the shaman was so boldly talking me gangsters, as other people usually tremble in fear at the sight of dangerous criminals. Jae-bae decided that Bunny was a great nickname for Sun Jaeon. The blonde explained to the clueless guy that it was from a fairy tale about a brave rabbit and a turtle. Moreover, he warned that henceforth the brunette would be called that, and the hero, barely suppressing his laughter, agreed to the nickname. The shaman asked what happened after he lost consciousness. Then the blonde admitted that nothing bad had occurred, as Bunny had protected his boss from the nuisance. Sun Jaeon sighed with relief. Now he didn't have to worry about the fake talismans that could have caused him trouble. Sang Tae, one of Jin Gai-yoon's subordinates, came into the room to summon the awakened shaman to him. He asked why the brunette was called Bunny, to which Jae-bae explained that the guy was associated with a well-known fairy tale. Sang Tae laughed, as the story they were referring to had a completely different title. Upon hearing this, Sun Jaeon decided that the real hero was not him but the one who had arrived. Jae-bae was obviously annoyed with his interlocutor, and grabbing him by the neck sent Bunny to the boss alone, as he and his colleague needed to talk privately. The brunette ran out of the room, hearing loud sounds of a struggle behind him. Sun Jaeon didn't envy poor Sang Tae, as they were the same age and it must be tough for such a young guy in the gang. Bunny's phone suddenly rang, and the shaman immediately realized it was Byung Jin, who was causing him suffering in the gangster's house. The guy answered the call, and he was immediately bombarded with complaints about how Sun Jaeon had abandoned his friend at the club and hadn't answered calls for several days. Bunny tried to keep his composure, but when Kong Hoon Lan was mentioned, the brunette began to furiously curse his friend. The hero mentioned the money won from the lottery, and Byung Jin immediately started offering to split the amount. But the shaman ended the call with the impudent person. In the office, Bunny was awaited not only by the boss but also by Tank, who closely scrutinized the companion chosen by Jin Bae-yoon. The chief assistant of the deceased decided to stay in a Seoul hotel to personally see the traitor when he was found. Sol-do went to see off the guest, and when Sun Jaeon was left alone with the gangster, the latter unexpectedly inquired about the shaman's well-being. The guy responded positively, and then Jin Bae-yoon asked if Tank was a criminal. Smiling, Sun Jaeon announced that the effect of his ability had already worn off. The boss got so angry that Bunny hid behind Seoul guy. The subordinate suddenly praised the shaman, as thanks to him, the boss might be able to secure the remaining share of the nightclub's profits, since, after the hero's stunt, the light-haired man agreed to give up his share for an appropriate price. Sol Bei also appreciated the brunette's loyalty as now with a talisman. No one would approach Jin Bei-yoon. Sun Jaeon was stunned when the subordinate finally handed over the previously drawn attributes to the boss. The guy nervously laughed when he realized that all his efforts at the club had been in vain. Sun Jaeon and Jin Bei-yoon are once again in the car, working on enhancing the shaman's abilities. Bunny was already tired of counting how many times he had spent time with the boss over the past few days, yet never used his abilities so often before. During the process, the guy suddenly announced that he was hungry. But Jin Bei-yoon clearly misunderstood him and became angry. The brunette meant something completely different. But the gangster didn't care anymore. He was trying to ensure that the shaman got as much pleasure as possible from using his gift. Bunny hadn't expected this at all, so he covered his face with his hands. Sun Jaeon and Jin Bei-yoon had never crossed the line of their intimacy, and even when the shaman hinted at it, the boss reacted negatively. But the brunette also did not wish to enter into such close relations with the leader of the criminal gang. And if Jin Bei-yoon had wanted that, the shaman would never have agreed. Arriving at the gangster's mansion, the dark-haired man gave Jin Bei a few instructions and Bunny immediately demanded food. On the way to the dining room, the guy overheard Sol Bei asking the boss for a few days off to go to the hospital for a consultation. At first, Sun Jaeon wanted to find out more details. But then he realized that he would probably not get an answer. So the shaman ran off to eat, deciding to question Sang Tae or Jebi later. At night, the hero couldn't fall asleep despite the warm bed and tasty dinner. He didn't understand the reason for this. Bunny got out of bed and went to the kitchen in search of food. There, his shaman found a can. It was a tonic drink for fatigue. Sun Jaeon took a sip and suddenly noticed Jin Bei-yoon in the living room, practicing martial arts. The boss was surprised to see someone here at such an hour, and wiping the sweat from his face explained that he just couldn't sleep. The brunette wanted to say something but soon noticed Jin Bei-yoon's stern look. The shaman was horrified when he guessed that it was his tonic. But not revealing his anxiety, he cheerfully handed the bottle to the boss. Sun Jaeon assured him that he hadn't drunk it, and when the dark-haired man accepted the drink, the guy could only hope that the truth wouldn't come out. The brunette suddenly felt hot, and when the boss sternly asked what the shaman had given him, he nervously replied that it was a tonic drink. Jin Bei-yoon irritably said that it was clearly more than just a fatigue elixir, as such drinks usually don't cause this kind of reaction. Sun Jaeon only then noticed the unusual effects on both his own and others' bodies as a result of drinking the tonic. Looking at Jin Bei-yoon, Bunny began to notice details he hadn't seen before. The flushed hero suddenly grabbed the dark-haired man's sleeve and looking straight into the gangster's eyes offered to do a fortune-telling.